Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in. This is the account with the news summary for day 394 of the war in Ukraine. I have one extra segment and one article to point out today. All updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Before we start though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Battles in and around Bakhmut continue. Minor Russian advances were reported around Khomove, but Ukraine managed to push them back again. Avdiivka. Heavy fighting continues around Avdiivka. Russian attacks are intensifying in this area. And now for the article I wanted to point out, titled Defending the City of Eternal Fire Through the Eyes of the Infantry. A report from the trenches near Avdiivka. This is a lengthy but very interesting article about the defense of Avdiivka. Please check it out. And to start the news segment, a look at Russia's night attack. Alexander Vilkul, head of the Kryvyi Rih military administration, has said that the Russian forces launched a drone attack with 6 Shahed UAVs. Serhiy Lysak, head of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast military administration, reported that 5 UAVs struck their target. 1 Shahed drone was shot down by the Military Air Command East. The Kyiv Oblast military administration reported a threat to Kyiv as well. Russia has also used a variety of weapons to attack Sumy Oblast overnight. Authorities reported the use of guided aerial bombs, MLRS, and Iranian-made kamikaze drones during the attack. At least 2 people died and 9 were injured. 5 people have been killed as a result of a Russian strike on the town of Kostiantynivka in Donetsk Oblast when one of the missiles hit an invincibility center. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. On March 24, 2022, the Armed Forces of Ukraine launched a missile strike on Russia's base in the seaport of temporarily occupied Berdiansk and dispelled the myth about the invulnerability of the Russian naval fleet. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, shared a video about how the Ukrainian troops destroyed the Saratov ship. The state concern Ukroboronprom has reportedly repaired over 3,000 armored vehicles since the war began. Ukraine has handed over all the seriously injured enemy soldiers who have been taken prisoners since the full-scale invasion started and whose medical condition allowed them to be transported to Russia. The Cabinet of Ministers has adopted a resolution that will significantly accelerate the creation and supply of domestically made UAVs to the front and create conditions for the rapid development of Ukrainian military technology. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Russia has announced the creation of a teenage military association which is supposed to assist in maintaining public order in the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhia Oblast. Additional footage of the drone attack in Sevastopol was shared today. Andriy Yusov, spokesman for Ukraine's defense intelligence, said that Russian occupation authorities in Crimea have started evacuating from the Ukrainian peninsula. Sergei Aksionov, Russian-appointed puppet leader of Ukrainian Crimea, has reportedly created his own PMC called Convoy. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Dmitry Medvedev, Deputy Secretary of the Security Council of Russia, has said in an interview with Russian propagandists that to achieve goals in the war, the Russian army may go not only to Kyiv but also to Lviv. Russia's income from state loans in 2022 turned out to be only 25% of the planned amount. Out of a total payment of 48.7 billion rubles, Russia managed to get 11 billion. The main reason for the drop in payments are sanctions. After the visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping, employees of the Bank of Russia are being told to urgently learn Chinese to better interact with Chinese partners. Chinese President Xi Jinping's pompously staged visit to Moscow ended without the key decision the Kremlin has been waiting for years. despite Russian President Vladimir Putin calling Xi dear friend and speaking Chinese, toasting his health. The Chinese delegation did not sign a new contract to buy Russian gas and build the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. Additionally, as soon as Chinese President Xi Jinping left Moscow, China's largest logistics company refused to ship goods to Russia. Russian authorities will introduce new family textbooks for children with the aim to strengthen traditional values. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. In Switzerland, which traditionally adheres to neutrality, authorities are trying to find out whether its Eagle 1 armored vehicles could have ended up at the front in Ukraine, as German journalists wrote about after publishing relevant photos on the internet. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken suggested that some Ukrainian territories occupied by the Russians will have to be returned by diplomatic rather than military means. As before, he noted that any decision in this regard should be made by Kyiv. Blinken has also said that the United States will continue to support Ukraine next year to ensure that President Putin's war remains a strategic failure. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine recorded human rights violations committed in the war, in particular execution of prisoners of war on both sides of the conflict. Germany has provided Ukraine with a new aid package which include DAX engineering vehicles, machine guns and spare parts for armored vehicles. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. As of mid-March 2023, Russia had likely redeployed at least 1,000 troops who had been training at the Obus Lesnovsky training ground in southwestern Belarus. Although no new rotation of troops has been noted, Russia has highly likely left the tented camp in place, suggesting it is considering continuing the training program. The fact Russia has resorted to training its personnel under the much less experienced Belarusian army highlights how Russia's special military operation has severely dislocated the Russian military's training system. Instructors have largely been deployed in Ukraine. Russia likely also views Belarus's continued indirect support to the operation as important political messaging. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. I'm a little under time pressure today, so I will just be reading the assessment headlines and not the full summary. Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin has softened his rhetoric towards the Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, likely out of fear of completely losing his mercenary force in Bakhmut. Prigozhin denied the Kremlin's claims that Russia is fighting NATO in Ukraine and questioned whether there are actually Nazis in Ukraine as the Kremlin constantly claims. Bloomberg reported that Prigozhin is preparing to scale back Wagner's operation in Ukraine after the Russian military leadership succeeded in cutting key supplies of personnel and munitions, citing unspecified people familiar with the matter. A Ukrainian intelligence official supported ISW's prior assessments that Russian forces are unable to conduct large-scale simultaneous offensive campaigns on multiple axes. Russian forces may be shifting their missile strike tactics to focus on Ukrainian military facilities as overall Russian missile strikes decrease, indicating the depletion of Russia's stocks of high-precision missiles. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin outlined various measures to support Russia's military personnel, the Russian Defense Industrial Base, DIB, and Russian independence from the West in an address to the State Duma on March 23rd. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, reported that Rosatom may be working to restore 3 power lines at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, ZNPP, which would increase Russian control over the ZNPP. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. During the day, the enemy carried out 40 airstrikes and 5 missile strikes, carried out more than 20 attacks from rocket salvo systems on the positions of our troops and the civilian infrastructure of populated areas. Civilians died. The probability of launching further missile and airstrikes on the entire territory of Ukraine remains high because the Russian occupiers will continue to use terror tactics. The enemy is concentrating its main efforts on conducting offensive operations in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shahtarsk directions. Ukrainian soldiers repelled more than 38 enemy attacks on them. In the Kupiansk and Liman directions, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Berdiansk forest area and near the settlements of Ryanikivka and Bilohorivka. In the direction of Bakhmut, the enemy continues its assault on the city of Bakhmut, which is held by our defenders, as well as in the areas of Oryhovo-Vasilivka, Bodanivka, Ivanivske, and Stupochki settlements of the Donetsk region. In the Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shahtarsk directions, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the direction of Keramik, Stepove, Avdiivka, Siverne, Pervomaiske, and Popieda settlements of the Donetsk Oblast. There was no success. The enemy is defending in the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions. In the temporarily occupied settlements of Luhansk Oblast, the invaders continue to put pressure on civilians. It is becoming more and more difficult to move between settlements. In particular, the village of Pluhatar can be accessed only by local residents with special passes. And that wraps up the report. Should you be interested in details, you can find links to every article I mentioned in the description. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. I hope you will join me again tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.